Hello, welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm SI SPURRIER and I'm here to talk about my new image book, The Voice Said Kill.
Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. I'm Andrew Sumner. I'm here with my pal, SI SPURRIER. How are you, mate?
Very good. As discussed, a little bit rough around the edges. There may have been some pub occurrences last night. You would know nothing about that,
Of
obviously.
course, I wouldn't. Clean living member of society that I am. And we're here. Speaking of blistering hangovers, we're here to talk about your new image book, The Voice Said Kill.
Yep.
So mate, very excited to see this. It is with us imminently. And what can you tell me about the genesis of the book, mate?
It's funny, like having been doing all the sort of interview circuit and talking an awful lot about this book. My natural instinct is to want to be verbose. It will astonish you to learn. I can waffle on. So I started out like, "What's the book about?" And it would take 4 days to explain what the book's about. And as this process of marketing has continued, and as we've got a little bit closer to the release date, I've ended up kind of distilling it down to 3 words: psychedelic swamp noir. So that's that's what The Voice Said Kill is: psychedelic swamp noir. It is the story of a Louisiana bayou wildlife park ranger. She's heavily pregnant. She shouldn't really be at work at all, but her entire team has been sent home with what appears to be food poisoning. And she should just be light duties in and around the ranger station when everything goes wrong, and she ends up having to tangle with a kind of off his meds killer out in the forest who's been gobbling magic mushrooms all day, and he's running around with an assault rifle. There ends up being a group of out of town drug smugglers sort of invading the space. Basically, it's the day from hell, and things just go from bad to worse. Very early on, she has to make a decision. Well, that's not true. She has to defend herself instinctively. And then, having done so, she has to make a decision about the fallout, how to deal with this crisis. And it's that decision which I think it's fair to describe as the wrong thing for the right reasons, which sends her into this spiral of increasing stakes, guilt, deep repercussions to do with responsibility. So I guess like the comps that we've been talking about, it's something like Fargo meets True Detective season one with a slightly unexpected dose of Apocalypse Now in there, in the sense that it becomes a journey into the wilderness, an unwilling journey into the wilderness. And I can say very little more about it than that.
Quite right too. Where did the setting, where did that come from? What was your inspiration there,
Hmm.
mate?
Well, it's funny that this is only the second time in my entire writing career that a story has occurred to me fully formed. Like normally you'll get the nugget of an idea, or a character will step out of your imagination, or there'll be a location that's fascinated you, whatever it is, and then it kind of accretes all these different things swirl together like a dust cloud, forming a nebula, forming a solar system. Um, with this, it was a complete idea, and for reasons I won't go into, because they end up tripping over some of the controlling ideas and the big thematic preoccupations that sit at the center of this story. Um, all the elements had to be exactly as they are. It had to be in a location which straddles the divide between civilization and wilderness. You know, this sort of very human, but also I would hazard this very American, and actually one better, a very white American notion that the kind of national psyche is related to one man versus the wilderness, the idea that you can tame the wild. Now that's kind of fairly well soaked into the national psyche in America, I think, but it's wrong. You know, you don't have to spend any time in, you don't have to spend much time in places like the bayou, and I've spent time there, or in forests or jungles, and I've spent time in all sorts of exciting places like that to recognize that we trick ourselves into feeling like we've somehow changed the world, we've tamed the wild. Actually, we're just sort of trespassing on it for short periods of time. Um, so the central character could therefore not be a white American. The themes end up speaking to motherhood and responsibility, and sort of how we chart our path through this garden world that we've inherited. And I'm sort of being overly verbose about the process that is essentially she therefore had to be a she had to be pregnant, she had to be non-white, she had to be somebody who'd grown up in poverty in this place, and da 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 da. Once you've got the story all completely ossified in your mind, then all of these decisions just sort of get made for you because you're being honest to the controlling idea and the theme. And then all that's left to do is, give the first domino a little nudge, and away it goes. And that's a great joy in writing something like this because it's all sort of preordained. There's this beautiful quest arc feeling in the sort of middle two acts, which just feels beautiful. The last act is a sort of grand guignol murder, blood-soaked thing in an alligator ranch, and it's just it all feels totally elegant, and it just stepped fully formed into my brain. And then the really exciting transformative element, which wasn't in my brain at all, and one of the reasons it's taken so long to bring it to press is that I knew I needed to find exactly the right artist. Now, I had assumed that this being a very tight, noir-esque crime thriller, I had assumed that the right artist was probably going to be somebody very clean line, somebody very sort of buttoned down and a little bit hard boiled. And actually, I became obsessed with getting Vanessa Del Rey to do it, and she has, and it's astonishing. And the reason that it's so um, additive, so transcendent, is that she doesn't seem like the obvious choice for a crime story. She's known for horror, she's known for the sort of psychedelic vibes, and those things somehow work perfectly in this context. Like, it doesn't hurt that the story has some psychedelic overtones anyway. There's a sort of subplot which has to do with um, altered states of reality, a slightly numinous vibe to the swamp which we're traveling through, all of which Vanessa gets her hands on and just transforms the book into something so much greater than the sum of its parts. And she's got this incredible ability to loosen or tighten her lines to suit the tension of a scenario, the scene that you're reading. So there'll be pages where a couple of squiggles are all that you need to recognize that there are two characters having a fairly louche moment. And then the second the tension starts to rise and the stakes start to rise, it all becomes much busier and much more detailed. And I think that's extraordinary and quite an exciting little phenomenon, and the sort of thing that you can really only do in comics that you can't really do in any other medium. So yeah, that's the sort of the long-winded way of saying what could have been a fairly straightforward crime thriller has become, under her pen, something quite sensorially psychedelic. I keep using this word as if there's a better one. There isn't a better one. It becomes something extremely transcendent, and yeah, I couldn't be prouder of it.
This is why I love talking to you about your work, mate, because you're the master of the confident and assured one question, complete answer. So I asked you one question, but you then
I'll let
went
you
on
get a
to
word in
answer my
edgewise.
others without me having to dig into it. So let's take a step back because that's fascinating to me. Your experience of creating this particular book.
Mm.
And was it a case of when you began to delve into your subconscious about the story concept and unpick those blocks within you, those pieces of masonry within your
Mm.
subconscious and assemble them? Was it like, oh, holy fuck, it's all here, it's already built? And did it come at you in a rush, or was it a sudden realization that you had the whole thing there, good to go? Did it come over a period of time?
Um, More, well, it's not a period, it's probably a day.
Yeah.
And what's it? So the first time, this is the second time something like this has happened. The first time was a sort of time travel story I wrote many years ago called Number Cruncher. Now, when you're dealing with a time travel story, if you want it to be really elegant, everything has to lock together perfectly anyway. It's like a sort of equation. All the different bits and bobs have to all work perfectly. With this, it wasn't quite the same. It was more, if memory serves, and it's really hard to get into the minutiae of this stuff because it ends up eclipsing itself. The more it evolves, you end up forgetting the previous stages. If memory serves, it began as a scene. I pictured a scene that I didn't quite understand, and it's a scene from I think the third issue of the run, in which our hero, who has been force marched through the swamp while heavily pregnant, sort of waddling and constantly needing to pee, endlessly terrified of her life, they come to a point where the path is blocked by a mother alligator. I don't know how much you know about alligators, but they when the hatchlings, they build these big piles of earth, and lay their eggs inside. When the hatchlings are ready to come out, they sing, and the mother alligator will come and dig them out. She sort of straddles the nest and digs them out, and then we'll look after them for a year in sort of shallow ponds. They're really, really good mothers. And in this idea and this vision I had, there's this incredible sight before them, but they tilt their heads around to the side and they can see that poachers, alligator poachers, have already dug out the inside of the nest and there are no eggs there. So there's just this gigantic ancient creature, like a visitor from prehistory, undertaking this very unexpected act of maternal protection and care, and like singing to her hatchlings, but they're not there. And it just felt like this really pathetic, tragic moment. And from that, everything else just went, oh, by the way, there's a whole plot which hangs around. And it's quite an involved plot. It's got nothing to do with the fucking alligator and the eggs. That's just this one funny little vignette in the middle of it all. And I just, like I said before, that as soon as you have an elegant, controlling idea and a set of themes, a set of things that you're interested in, there's no danger of straying off down odd little tangents. And I don't quite know what this story's about. I don't know what the plot's going to be because it just keeps coming back and referring to itself over and over again. And as with so much fun crime thriller material, the sort of shape of the arc is always going to be this escalating series of stakes and tensions. So you know that the ending is going to be some sort of release of pent-up tension, a fight, a a shootout. That's exactly what it is. I won't say too much without spoiling it, but it's the last issue is really cool. And then it was just a case of designing the characters and how they talk and their thoughts and feelings. And that's another interesting point that you bring in an artist, they start doing sketches, and before you know it, characters whose voices you thought you could hear end up talking a little differently, and you have to become a little bit reactive. It becomes a dialogue between the sketch and the idea of these characters you had in your mind already. And again, that's all part of the magic of comics, that sort of collaborative dialogue.
Collaborative nature of it. Yes, of course. How did you find the bayou when you visited it?
Oh, just beautiful. The smells stay with me. And fun thing, like I live by the seaside anyway, right? So I've got a weird romance with water, but I could sit and stare at a body of water and the Spanish moss blowing in the wind. I could just sit there for hours. I'd be quite happy there for days, just watching things poking up out of the water and all of that stuff. But it's a combination of that trip, and I wish I'd been there longer. I was only there for a couple of days, but enough to sort of absorb as much sensory information as I could. But I also took a long trip a few years ago into the rainforest in Bolivia, where we sort of went right out into like real jungle in the sense like you watch a movie with people, watch Predator, people running around in the jungle. That's not what the real jungle looks like. You cannot move through real jungle.
Correct. Yeah.
It's like trying to walk through a wall. So we have to press through tiny little gaps. We have to hope that there are paths that have been carved out by other people or animals. Um, And it just crept up on me in a slightly psychedelic moment that in these wild environments, truly wild environments, the secret is everything lives as a consequence of everything else dying. There is this perpetual machine in which the death of something permits the life of something else. Life feeds on life, and it always has, and it always does. And we sort of like to imagine it as this extremely serene, beautiful, oh, Mother Nature giving her gifts. But it's very bloody and it's very chaotic, and there is a sort of perverse beauty in that as well, I think. And that's a lot of what our central character in The Boy Said Kill understands, recognizes, intuits more than any of the other characters. She's soaked in love for the bayou. She's lived there all her life. She mentions in a few places that there are these little hints that her childhood was probably not very happy. And yet she's surrounded by these venal, greedy, arrogant people who think that it's just a place that they can trample across. It's just a path, and they don't understand that they are visiting and may not be welcome visitors. And that's, I think, quite an interesting dynamic. These big, strong, crimey characters who think they're the big daddies of it all, who are actually well out of their depth. I love that vibe.
Yeah, something that fascinates me about your work, and I think that shines through in your work, is your the amount of time that you spend trying to truly understand the characters that you are writing, and the amount of work that you do to understand the location in which those characters are operating. And I know from conversations that we've had elsewhere and in other locations that the locative research that you do when you're writing is really on a different level to many of the other authors that I know. I'm thinking of your anecdote about, to me, it was horrifying on one level, your solo spelunking jaunt.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, when you're doing some subterranean research, and that is completely new to me. But I think that shines in the work that you do, and I think that's why your work has this wonderful evocative sense, not just of who the people are, because you spend a lot of time with them, but of these locations that really pop
Well,
because you do your legwork.
there's a bit. There's definitely that. I mean, the interesting counter to that is that a lot of the work I'm best known for is sort of world creation. But
Yeah.
I feel like you can't you can't just spin from whole cloth a whole new world without also being aware of what it might smell like and what it might feel like, and then the sort of the second strata of social phenomena. You know, how does this economy work? What do these people think and believe about each other? All of that stuff, which you can just sit down and make it up, but it won't feel very honest if you've never absorbed enough of reality to have a good idea of how it might feel if you were there in the moment. And yeah, there's just something fundamentally, um, I guess it's a sort of dignified honesty that I think has to be part of anything, especially if you're writing something that you want to be taken seriously. You know, it's a little different if it's a silly, funny story, but if you're writing about heavy concepts like parenthood and like responsibility and how best to be in this world, especially if you're writing somebody who is not basically a facsimile of yourself. You know, here I am trying my level best to write, if not from the point of view of, then at least from the standpoint, through the eyes of somebody who is very clearly not myself. If you have the opportunity to do that and you don't want to come across like an absolute faker, you have to be radically empathetic. You have to be extremely observant. You have to ask a lot of questions to a lot of people who are better suited to to answering these perspectives. And you have to accept that your own preconceptions won't always be what drives the plot, which is always quite fun when you thought you knew how somebody would react, and then your researches or your meditations upon the subject make you realize actually they do something quite different. It usually leads to a better story, but you have
Yeah.
to first be willing to go, shit, throw it all away, start again.
I love that, mate. Very well said. Before we depart, Si, the voice said kill can be purchase from the links attached to our conversation. And issue one has a really lovely sequence of alt covers. Can you talk about those for a second?
Yeah, sure. So the main cover is by Vanessa Del Rey
Of
herself,
course.
which is beautiful. We've got a Christian Ward variant, which is extremely lovely as well, and we've got a Tula Lote variant. And then forthcoming for subsequent issues, there's got Simon Gain did one. He's one of my very favorite artists. Matthias Bergara, of course, one of my longtime collaborators, did a variant. And then the exciting one for me is that the fourth issue, the variant, is by the project's designer, Emma Price, with whom I have worked on almost everything I've ever
Yeah.
done for her own. She's an extraordinary designer. And it turns out that she's also a fantastic illustrator. The declaration of interest here is that, reader, I married her. So it's
Of
really
course.
nice to be working with her on that. But
How
yeah, no,
lovely.
from a collector's perspective, there's some really beautiful artifacts coming through.
And Simon, that's not all. You're joining us for a Voice Said Kill signing, are you not?
I am indeed on Wednesday, 23rd of July, which is the day that the first issue drops. I will be at Forbidden Planet on Shaftesbury Avenue in London at, I think it's 5:30 until 6:30, but I'm going to assume that information will be put on the screen if I'm wrong about that.
Absolutely correct. The information about your signing will be right here below, magically below our conversation. Sadly, I will miss you because I will be out. I'll be out San Diego Comic Con with some of the Titan crew, but I will be thinking of you, and I know you'll be very well looked after by Tom and Dean and the glorious crew
a good
at Forbidden Planet London.
and always happy to sign anything that people bring within reason. But yeah, no, I'll be there with a Sharpie. So come see me.
Thanks, my brother. Be there or be square for the great Simon Spurrier. Thank you, mate. Thanks so much for joining me, mate. Very excited about this book. I know you've worked tremendously hard on it, and I can't wait for you to bring it to the readers
Thank you.
and in those lovely image editions. Always great to see you, mate. You
And
take care
you,
of yourself.
take
I'll
it
see you
easy.
very soon. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.